In 1964, an architect finished building his own home, 800 square feet, tucked in the side of a mountain above Palm Springs. When he was done, there was a boulder sitting in the middle of his living room. Not a decoration, not a design choice he could undo. He built the entire house around it, because the boulder was never coming out. Today, tour guides at that house call it exactly what it is, a tiny house, wrapped around a piece of the mountain it's sitting on. And it's not the only one. Once I started digging, I found a man who spent years hand drilling through solid granite boulders in the Cascade Mountains to carve himself a home. I found a $10 million mansion in Colorado where the builders got so attached to a boulder, they went and found a matching baby rock. And I found a man who dug a home directly into the base of an actual, famous 7-story boulder in the California desert, using dynamite in the 1930s. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how you build a house around something you can't move, why architects keep choosing to do this on purpose, and the honest, serious engineering risks that come with living next to several tons of solid rock. Stick around for that last part, because it's the difference between a stunning design and a genuinely dangerous one. Before we get into the rock, hit subscribe if strange, real architecture is your thing, because we track down builds like this every single week. Alright, let's actually get into it. Let's start with the clearest, best documented example, because this one isn't a rumor or a concept render. It's a real, historic building you can actually tour today. Frey House II sits 300 feet above Palm Springs, California, in the San Jacinto Mountains, built by Swiss-born architect Albert Frey as his own personal home. Frey didn't rush this. He spent roughly 5 years selecting the exact site, and then an entire additional year just tracking how the sun moved across the land with a 10-foot pole, before he ever started designing. What he found on that site was an enormous granite boulder, sitting right where he wanted to build. Instead of blasting it out of the way, which would have been the conventional move, Frey did something almost nobody was doing in 1964. He built the house directly around it. In his own words, describing the process, he said he had a careful survey made showing all the rock, put up strings to work out the design, and then had to, quote, fit the glass to the rock. The boulder ended up sitting right inside the finished house, physically dividing the living area from the bedroom. You literally walk around a piece of the mountain to get from one room to the other. The finished home is only 800 square feet. Frey added a small 300 square foot guest room a few years later, but the core house has stayed exactly as small and exactly as strange as he originally built it. Multiple sources describing the property today, including its own official tour guides, refer to it outright as a tiny house. Genuinely one of the earliest, most architecturally significant tiny homes ever built, and it happens to be wrapped around solid rock. When Frey passed away in 1998, he left the house to the Palm Springs Art Museum, and it's still open for scheduled tours today, exactly as he left it. The construction itself is worth understanding too, because it's not as simple as just building a normal wall next to a rock. The house sits on a concrete block podium that forms the actual base, with a lightweight steel frame rising from it, sheathed in painted corrugated metal, and enormous spans of glass filling in the rest. The roof itself is a thin steel plane, seemingly floating above the concrete terraces on slender steel beams, and its slope was deliberately designed to exactly mirror the slope of the mountainside behind it. So from a distance, the whole structure genuinely reads as an extension of the terrain rather than something dropped onto it. Every piece of furniture inside, right down to the light switches, was built directly into the walls and the rock itself, including a light switch that's literally chased into the boulder. Frey House II isn't alone in this idea. It's just the smallest, most tiny house-scaled example of a much bigger trend where builders treat an enormous boulder as a feature to design around, rather than an obstacle to remove. Take a much larger, much more recent example, a home in Boulder, Colorado, aptly enough, currently listed for around $10 million. The architect and builder, Matt McMullen, built the entire 8,400 square foot house around a boulder positioned by the back patio. They actually searched the whole Denver metro area to find a second rock that matched the color and lichen pattern of the original boulder and of the nearby Flatirons rock formations, craned it into place before the roof went on, and tucked it right between the kitchen and dining room. McMullen half-jokingly called the original boulder the mommy rock, and the matched one they brought in the baby rock they had to adopt. There's also a 5,800 square foot home in Escondido, California, built back in 1975 by an owner named Robert Hampson, who reportedly blasted out several boulders on the property, specifically to build his dream home around and through them, leaving one large boulder sitting right in the middle of the finished house. What all of these projects share, whether they're 800 square feet or 8,000, is the same basic decision. Instead of treating a giant, immovable rock as a construction problem, architects have repeatedly chosen to treat it as the actual center of the design, something the entire house gets built to honor rather than remove. There's a second, even more extreme version of this idea, and it's less about building around a boulder and more about carving directly into one. In the Cascade Mountains near Leavenworth, Washington, a semi-retired attorney named Steve Demarest bought a rocky, mostly unusable piece of land that happened to have a small natural cave his kids used to play in. Once his kids outgrew it, Demarest decided it was his turn. He moved in with tools and simply started working the rock by hand. The first chamber turned out too small, so he kept pushing back into the hillside, at one point spending an entire month drilling through the intersection of two massive boulders before the rock, as he put it, finally gave up, opening into a second chamber that eventually became his actual living space. Because the space was enclosed on every side by solid boulders acting as walls, the only thing missing was a roof. Demarest solved that with a genuinely clever engineering trick. A spiderweb-style arrangement of steel I-beams radiating out from a central column, which he then covered in waterproofing, insulation, and finally a layer of dirt, giving the finished home the kind of natural, year-round insulation that keeps it comfortable through the region's genuinely extreme winters and summers. Demarest has described the process with a kind of reverence, saying the rocks are effectively his architect, telling him what to do, and that he finds the challenge of working with stone more interesting than working with dirt or whatever was. And this isn't even a new idea, historically speaking. Back in the 1930s, in the California desert, a man named Frank Kritzer dug an entire underground home directly into the base of giant rock, a genuinely massive, 7-story freestanding boulder considered one of the largest of its kind in the world. Kritzer used dynamite to excavate the space, engineered his own rainwater collection system and a ventilation tunnel, and reportedly kept the underground rooms remarkably stable year-round, never hotter than about 80 degrees Fahrenheit and never colder than the mid-50s, entirely because of the rock's natural insulating mass. He lived there until 1942. That home, and giant rock itself, later became a strange, genuine landmark in UFO folklore through the following decades. But the original engineering behind it was completely real and honestly pretty impressive for the 1930s. So why go through all of this, instead of just clearing the site and building something conventional? A few genuine, recurring reasons show up across every one of these projects. The first is thermal mass. Rock is exceptionally good at absorbing heat slowly during the day and releasing it slowly at night, which is exactly why Kritzer's underground rock home stayed so stable year-round, and why earth and rock-covered structures like Demarest hold up so well against extreme seasonal swings. Building with a rock, instead of against it, can genuinely reduce how hard you have to work to heat and cool a home. The second is that unmovable objects make for a genuinely strong design constraint, and strong constraints tend to produce more interesting architecture. Frey talked about fitting his glass to the rock, not the other way around. The boulder forced decisions he might never have made on an open, empty lot, and the result is widely considered one of the most significant pieces of desert modernist architecture ever built. And third, there's a simpler, more emotional reason that comes up again and again in interviews with people who've actually done this. The sense that you're not fighting the landscape, you're joining it. Several of these builders specifically talk about wanting their home to look like it grew out of the site, rather than being dropped onto it. A boulder sitting inside your living room is about as literal a version of that idea as architecture gets. It's worth being honest, though, that this remains a genuinely rare and expensive way to build. Every one of these examples required either serious money, serious time, or both. Frey spent roughly 6 years just studying his site before construction even began. The Boulder, Colorado home is currently listed at $10 million, and Demarest's project took years of hand labor with no professional crew at all. This isn't really a build type that scales into a standard product the way a modular tiny house on a trailer does. Each one is genuinely a one-of-a-kind response to one specific rock on one specific piece of land, which is part of why so few of them exist at all. Now here's the part worth being genuinely careful about, because building around or into rock isn't just a design choice. It comes with real structural and safety considerations that these projects have to solve, not just a shed of size. Weight and stability are the first concern. A boulder large enough to divide a living room can weigh many tons, and if it's being incorporated into a structure rather than simply sitting on undisturbed ground, engineers have to confirm the surrounding foundation and framing can genuinely handle that load without shifting over time. In the Boulder, Colorado home, the steel frame of the house was specifically engineered to support the boulder's weight, and the rock itself was drilled to allow water to pass through it rather than pool against the structure, a detail that matters far more than it might sound, because trapped water against a stone and steel interface is a slow, ongoing path toward corrosion and water damage. Moisture management generally is the second, bigger concern, especially for anything built into or under rock the way Demarest and Kritzer's homes were. Stone and earth-covered structures need serious waterproofing between the rock and the living space, because groundwater and seasonal runoff will always find the lowest point available. And if that lowest point is your bedroom, you have a serious, expensive problem. Demarest builds specifically layered waterproofing membranes before adding insulation and dirt, precisely to manage this. And then there's a risk that's easy to forget simply because these homes look so permanent. Rock formations aren't actually static. Freeze-thaw cycles, seismic activity, and slow erosion can shift or crack boulders over decades, which is exactly why any serious builder incorporating a large rock into a structure brings in a structural or geotechnical engineer to assess the specific formation first, rather than just treating its rock, its solid, as a given. A boulder that sat in one place for 10,000 years is usually a safe bet, but usually is still doing real work in that sentence. And it's exactly why this remains a genuinely specialized, expensive type of build rather than something a typical builder takes on casually. So, was a tiny house really built inside a giant rock? In the most well-documented, historically significant case, genuinely yes. Albert Frey's own 800-square-foot home, built directly around a boulder that still splits the living room from the bedroom today, 60 years later, exactly where Frey put it. And it's part of a much bigger, honestly kind of beautiful pattern of builders, from a Palm Springs modernist to a Cascade Mountains hobbyist to a 1930s desert dynamite enthusiast, choosing to build with an immovable piece of the earth instead of blasting it out of the way. It's a genuinely striking way to build a home. It's also a genuinely serious engineering undertaking, one that only works when the structural risks around weight, water, and geologic movement get taken as seriously as the aesthetic vision does. If you want to actually see inside Frey House II and how a boulder ends up functioning as a wall, that's exactly what we're covering next. So stay subscribed and keep your notifications on. Thanks so much for sticking with this one all the way to the end. Drop a comment and tell me honestly, would you want to live with a giant boulder sitting in your living room? Or does that sound like a nightmare waiting to happen? See you in the next one.